Okay, so another day of electrical. Yesterday, I installed the cruise control lever and had to fish the wire down through the column, pop it out through the grommet down there. I would have done a video on that, but it would have been mostly beeps. That sucked. That was not fun. So I'm just going to show you how I did it. Basically, you just take out this plate here. This plastic, the actuator, there's 3 screws, pull that out, then you got to fish the wire down, pull the grommet down there, and then eventually you'll hit it. And then I pushed it down with a piece of TIG rod and got it to come up, but it was not without its trials and tribulations. Okay, so in here you can kind of see where I'm going with this now. I've got the my plate with all the terminal blocks for the switched power, the ground, and the constant power. And I've also made another plate in here, hopefully we can get a good look at that, for the Dakota Digital stuff. So the CRC 1000 is the cruise control. Then I have my BIM 03-2 on top of that, which is the fuel pressure sending unit, and then the regular HDX control box for the gauges. So I've kind of set those up there on a plate, and I got that plate set up so that I can just take it down. I'm going to put like a little bit of a service loop so I can get it down to about here. And then I'll just put 2 nuts on the bolts that I have hanging in there. Watch me struggle. There we go. So that'll sit up in there nicely like that, and everything will be tucked up in and out of the way. And you can see it doesn't interfere with on the AC unit. Let's see if I can get in here a little better. Yeah, it doesn't interfere with the ducts on the AC unit. So that should work out pretty good. I like to get all my hardware in place before I start wiring. So that's why the AC box is in there, all these pieces. Now, one issue I did run into, yeah, you can see the wire here that I had to pull through for the cruise control, the old zoom control. One thing I did have an issue with is my gas. So anyway, I had to rebuild the bracket for that the pedal mounts to, just to kind of kick it over a little bit. Just thought that would be my easiest point to do it. This, of course, is the pedal here. And this is a standard Corvette Camaro pedal. And the bracket that came with it is like this. And you just bolt that down to that plate. So I had to kick it over a little bit. So I built this bracket that replaces it. And this should work just fine. I also put in a little stop here for the pedal, because one of the things they tell you is they don't really want you, wailing on the old plastic here when it's full throttle. It'd be nice to have a stop. So I put in a place so I can get it, a full throttle stop there. Not sure I'll need it, but it's there. Anyway, so now I'm going to continue on. I'm going to put all that back together, get that installed, and then I'll be ready to start wiring again, I guess. Okay, here's what I've got done so far. There's wires. There's a lot of wires. So I got some routing done around the terminal block panel back here. Best you can see it that way. I hope. There you go. I started wiring in the Dakota Digital panel. Now I'm at a point where first thing I did was wired in the cruise control. A lot of this is just shortening stuff up. Like this cable here was like 3 feet long, so it needed to be 3 inches. So I've been adjusting cables and terminating the sensors. We got the temperature, oil pressure, and fuel pressure here. I don't have the fuel sending unit up here yet. I don't have a dimmer adjustment, so I'm going to run without that. And the mill input from the ECU, and basically what that is a check engine light. So I've got a next wire power and ground for this. I've been kind of, like I said, I've been working it so I have about a foot of extra wire here that I will coil up when I put this up in place, but it's just a lot easier to work on it out here. So I've also got my speaker up in there. That blue tape you see was because I was trying to hold a piece of fabric over the top of it so you didn't look like just a raw speaker through the slots. So one of the next things I've got to do, this is the Bowler all-in-one harness for the T56 transmission. I've got to get the speed sensors off this, power and ground it. There's also the reverse light and stuff off that, but we're not ready for any of that yet. And I've got a bunch of power and grounds, and then I've got brake lights and got the brake and the clutch switches on this so that the cruise control disengages when you hit the clutch or the brake. So I'm going to just kind of, I think I'm going to take a break for today. I've got everything tidied up pretty nice for the AC harnesses done. That's brought right over. Everything clicked in pretty good there. But this is probably the most uncomfortable I've been in this whole process. It's like you're laying under this dash on your side the whole time trying to pull wire and keep everything straight, working from schematics. Once I get pretty much the power and grounds done on this and the Bowler harness tied into it and tied into its own power and grounds, and I think I'm going to start the chassis harness, and we'll get that started so that there's so many things that this has to tie to. So just trying to keep everything straight has been a mission, but we're getting there. It's just you got to go slow. You got to think everything through and use the ferrules, man. The ferrules make a big difference. You're screwing down on a ferrule rather than on a bare wire like that. You screw down on this, and eventually it will, weave and unwind a little bit, and the screw will loosen up. Ferrules won't do that. It's important. So, yeah, and that's the new position of the accelerator, throttle pedal. That looks great. I'm very happy with where that landed. It was about 1.5 inches closer to the brake pedal before. So that's all copacetic. And I'm just going to keep plugging along. I've got days ahead of me doing this. Today's Saturday. You can tell college football's on. I'll be right back at it tomorrow. Just keep digging and, working through the schematics slowly and just trying to make sure you understand everything you're working with and leave everything that's not tied hanging out in conspicuous places so nothing gets forgotten. But it's all coming through pretty good. I can't complain. Got to tidy some stuff up in there. Not happy with how it all looks, but once I get all the wires run up from this, I'll wrap that bundle and then get this bolted up in. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. So just keep on pushing it. All right, next day. So one of the next things I'm going to hook up here is this Bowler all-in-one harness solution. Now this is pretty slick. Kind of a really nice deal for if you're using a T56 transmission. But basically what this is a little wiring harness that kind of plugs into the tranny to the various ports in the transmission. It plugs into the speed sensor, the reverse lockout, the reverse light, the reverse switch. Has a little built-in fuse, but it has this little module, epoxy sealed module on it. And what you do is you hook this harness up to the transmission, then it gives you a few wires. It gives you a speed output that you can connect to this little module with Bluetooth and program in your tire diameter, gear ratio, and all of that. and it'll give you a calibratable, accurate pulse for the Dakota Digital dash for speed. So kind of takes all the guesswork out of it. It also gives you reverse lockout, where you can set the speed at which you won't allow it to go in reverse. It also gives you a reverse light switch. So, you know, just a few little key functions that kind of make it a little weird to hook up, you know, a transmission that really wasn't meant for this car. But for the T56, this is a nice little setup. So that's what I'm going to wire up next. I've got a few leads that have got to go into the Dakota Digital box here, speed sensor A and B, and then I've got the reverse light stuff that I'm just going to, and it's got to need power and ground, obviously. So I'll get all that hooked up, and then everything else I'm going to tag it that needs to go to the chassis harness. And the chassis harness is one of the things we're going to do next. After I finish up the power and ground connections for the Dakota Digital, then this is all chassis harness stuff over here. But speed sensor, I got to get the tack. I got to figure out how to get the tack in. And then the other part here, this is the bowler harness. So I've got 12 volts, ground, speed sensor, and then the reverse light switches. So I'm gonna get going and keep working with that first. Oh boy, okay. So the Dakota Digital stuff is pretty much wired up. Everything's connected to it except for things that need to come from the chassis harness, which is what I got to put in next. It's just, it's time. So I got a painless harness. This is pretty slick. These come with a lot of stuff, but it's a nice looking setup. They seem to give you everything you need. We'll see if that's true. But where I'm running kind of a hybrid solution here, there's going to be some things that I'm not using. They even give you some dielectric grease and things like that. Should keep that handy. Anyway, some propaganda, heat shrink, bunch of different connectors, fasteners, stuff like that. They really seem to do a really nice job of, you know, providing a complete kit. Now, and this manual is impressive. I've kind of gone through this. I mean, it's a full-blown book. But first things first, well, one other thing I want to point out is every wire has a number on it and a description for what it's for. So if you're in question about anything, you can just look up the wire number, see where it's coming from, done. So kind of neat. I am going to, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start looking through this harness, and there's a lot of stuff in here I'm not going to use. For instance, the power windows, power door locks, not used. I'm going to pull the cables out and save them, just in case I ever want to do it, but I'm not going to use that. What else do we got here? Okay, headlights, turn signal, reverse lights, dome lights, those are all used. Horn, hazard, coil. That might be what I use for my switched ignition. I believe that's a switched ignition circuit. So I might use that to feed the ECU. Accessories, cigarette lighter, wipers, tail lights, door locks, nope. Radio, nope. Gauges, nope. I've got my own circuit. Probably should have just used this fuse for it, however, but I didn't, so we're going to work that out. Fuel pump, no. That comes from the ECU in this case. AC heat, I've got that comes from the fuse, fuse box / relay box, both of these. Choke, not needed. Parking and tail lights, yep. Radio, yes. Power windows, no. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull some of this apart and see what I don't need and just kind of thin this out a little bit first. But yeah, this is a nice little setup. I'm pretty impressed with it. Nice, clean. You do have to enlarge the hole a little bit for where the plug goes through the firewall, which I've already done. So gonna give this a go. See what happens. Apparently they're very impressed with their classic braid. Give you a little propaganda, a little salesmanship there. And then on top of this, I still have another the harness for the wipers and the harness for the convertible top, which is separate. So anyway, we're going to start with this. I think the first thing I'm going to do is go through this, pick out what I don't need, remove the wires so I don't have a bunch of extra wires hanging around, and then work my way back from there. All right, so I've started with the underhood harness. This is the one that plugs into the bulkhead going through the firewall. I've pulled the connectors for the circuits that I'm not going to use. I carefully went through the list and just crossed out the ones I was not going to be using. And a lot of this is because, you know, I have an LS3. If this was a regular motor, a small block, then we'd be using all of this. But as an LS3, there's some things in here you don't need. I also have the different wiper systems, so the only thing that needs to come up front is the washer pump. But I don't need the coolant temp, all this. I actually don't need coil ignition coming under here either. I got to find that one. That one I've got to feed back through to inside the firewall, but I'll get to that in a minute. Battery source. This is the wire that runs from the alternator to through the MIDI block. That's already done. But 916, is that this one though? There is one large wire here that I do need to terminate because this is the wire that feeds the fuse box. So I'm going to tie this back into the MIDI block, MIDI fuse. So anyway, gonna keep poking my way through this. I'm gonna take all these extra wires out and work my way back and then start working on the other harness. Okay, so now this is the internal block. This is where it goes through the bulkhead and meets the engine harness. I've got to now go through and wean this out a little bit and try to figure out what goes where. So I will get started. Some of this stuff is just literally connections between the fuse and the panel. I'm not sure I'm going to pull those out, and here's why. Because they're not hurting anything, right? So I may or may not do that. Let me try to figure that out, and we'll see what we get. But the big thing is I've just got to get rid of excess wires in these two bundles right here, because there's a lot of them. Just a lot of stuff I'm not using simply because I have different, you know, I use the ECU from GM, I use the HDX Dakota Digital gauge set. So, you know, a lot of the old wiring isn't necessary, but some of it I'm going to piggyback onto and use anyway. So anyway, I'm gonna take you through it as I start moving along. Okay, piece of cake. It looks a lot worse than it is. Okay, so I've gone through, taken out the circuits that I will not be using, and reduce the number of fuses by a few, rework some stuff. This is going to work great. I think I'm going to end this video here, however, and start the next video with installing this whole harness. But anyway, I think I'm ready. It looks good. I think everything else is prepped. I don't think installing this harness to a point where I can start this car is going to take all that long. I'm hoping I can wrap up the under the dash stuff, the under the hood wiring. I'm not going to do the lights yet, obviously, because they're not on here, but I'm going to bring the wires up and tape them off so they can't short or anything. And then, get it to a point where I can test the stuff, and then I'll be ready to light this thing. I got a few other question marks, like my starter switch. I got to verify that I got the right connector for that. Little things like this, and my light switch and stuff, but I feel like I'm getting really close. So I know it doesn't look it, but I got a hell of a mess going on in here. But anyway, we're gonna wrap it up for the evening. It's a good breaking point. I'm getting a little tired, and tired equals mistakes, so I don't want to make any mistakes. But yeah, looking good. I think I'm going to be in good shape. Once I get everything wired and tested, I will then loom everything up underneath there, wrap everything up above, and get everything cleaned up super nice so it doesn't look like a nest. But yeah, just gotta, this many more connections. This is the amount of wire I pulled out of it, extra. So, I don't like having, you could just give it a haircut, cap the lines off. I mean, heat shrink the ends, but there's just a lot of extra wire laying around in there, and don't like that. So we're gonna work this out, get this installed. The first thing you do, obviously, is push this through the firewall, seal it up against the hole, and then bolt this in, and then engage the other side from the engine compartment. So, looks good. Everything makes sense to me so far. I am going to bring this book down tonight and read it thoroughly. But, like I said, good breaking point, so I'll probably wrap this video here. Got a lot done this weekend. Really pretty happy with it. I got the power distribution done last weekend, obviously. But I do have tomorrow off, so I will be back at it tomorrow. So you may not have to wait that much longer for the next part of this video. And again, this is the engine harness, or the front section harness. Very little to do with the engine, actually, but you got to start it. The starter wire's in there. The rest of it's lights, and the windshield washer pump still survives. Emergency brake light switch. Little things like this. They all got to be taken care of and loom nice and looking good. I still got to loom all this, get rid of my green tape and that I have all over the wires, and package that up. But I just like to tape things as I go, and then I just peel the tape off later and then wrap it with the nylon wrap. So it looks like that's about it for today. Hope you guys had a good week. Yeah, we'll see you next week.